Yeah, I always think that when you play in-play betting, you need to watch at least 4 games of the match you want to play on. We all have an opinion before the match, usually if it's given myself or Sean. But I think watching those 4 games can either enhance that opinion to make it stronger and potentially get a bigger price during the in-play than we did pre-match, or we could be drastically wrong. I think we should look for how comfortable your player holds the serve or how uncomfortable he is with break points against him. But I think it's very, very important to see the gauge, see the fitness of the player, to see the movement of the player, and also to see the attitude of the player. We see a lot of these tournaments where, especially in the lower levels of the ATP Tour, where the big players aren't really at their game. So we will know a lot more about them when we see 4 games in the match, and then when we see that and we're comfortable, that's when I think we should have the action and play on the in-play. I think it's very important if you're betting a player to make sure that he's held his serve before you place a bet. So I would never bet anybody in play who is currently serving or is about to serve, because there is a potential that he could lose that serve or maybe even struggle in that serve, get to 30-30, where your price in that game for your player to win the match is going to increase. So I believe if you're ever going to play a better player in play, make sure you bet it after he's served. And then you have that time break when there's a sort of a drinks break before they come out again. So on the odd numbers, then if he's held serve, place that bet. Then there is a chance that he could break the return when he returns to the match and break the serve of his opponent, which gives you an even better play. You've taken the value. So there is that small danger that when you're betting a player who is serving, he could be broken, and you don't want to be struggling. You want to get the value, and the value is when your player has held his serve and has the opportunity to break and go a very, very low price in play. On an average tennis match in the men's ATP Tour, around about 10 games is what you would expect in a men's match. Now, it doesn't matter if it's a 3-set match or a 5-set match. So if we're betting the overs or we're betting the unders, there is a key stage of the match in any tennis match, and that is at 3-3 or 4-4. If you're on the overs, you want that player to hold and go into a 5-4 lead, and then you at least got the 10 games. So if you're doing overs in any kind of tennis match, you want at least 10 games on your side. If we're going unders, then you want the break. So that key moment in that tennis match at 3-3 or 4-4 is really, really important. So that is the key part of the set where you're betting. If you're betting the set 1 overs or you're betting the match overs at 3-3 and 4-4, you've got a big couple of minutes ahead of you. Now, tennis has become one of the most popular betting in-play sports in the world. Arguably one of the most popular in-play. And if you speak to any in-play trader, they'll say there is a key point, and it's 15-40. Now, if a favourite is serving at 15-40, or any player is actually serving at 15-40, statistically, the server is still the favourite to win that game. Now, that's remarkable, and I know a lot of people will be looking to press the button on the player who has the chance with the break point, but that is the wrong thing to do. 15-40, the server is still favourite. The reason why is if he holds a serve at 30-40, the line movement is massive. If it goes to juice, then it goes back to how we originally had it at the start of the match. So really, I think that point is really, really crucial. That can happen at any stage of the game in set 1, set 2, set 3. You've got to be quick, though. 15-40, the bookmakers aren't silly. They know that that line is important and the price might not be on the board. But if you've got the quick fingers and you can hit the button, don't go into the public perception that the returner is going to win the game. It's usually going to be the server. Statistically, it's about 52% that the server holds his serve at 15-40, and that is where the line movement comes in on the in-play. So 15-40, always get with the man trailing and serving. Now, if we've taken a favourite, it doesn't matter what sport it is. It could be in the NFL, it could be in the soccer. I know that in-play bettors like to get with them again if they trail. If they go 1-0 down in a soccer match, if they go 7-0 down in an NFL game, you want to get with the favourite again. The same rule does apply in tennis, but not necessarily all the time. The first thing we've got to remember about tennis is we have different levels of tournaments. We have ATP 250 events where there's not really much money at stake. There's not many prize money at stake. There's not many ranking points at stake. And it works all the way up to the Grand Slams. Now, with the favourite goes behind, if it's a Novak Djokovic or a Carlos Alcaraz, and he goes behind in an ATP 250, my first reaction is he's injured, or he's not interested in this match. So I would not be pressing on the favourite or getting involved with the favourite. I think he could have an off day and go with the outsider. But the higher level we go, if we go up to ATP Tour 1000, the likes of Rome, we have tournaments obviously in Monte Carlo as well. I think then, in America, we have Indian Wells and Miami. I think then the favourite does become the value because he's got big points and big money to be playing for. And even if we go higher to the majors, best of 5 sets, if we've got a player loses the first set, there's nothing to worry about. The cream will rise to the top. But I think in those low-level ones, the ATP Tour 250 events, I don't think that trend does really sort of back it. The stats don't really back it up. So for me, the low level ATP 250, you go one set down, you're in trouble. If you're in a 1,000 event or a Grand Slam, you go one set down, we're still going to cash. Now, if you're on the Bet Rivers website, you will see the market on the tennis. They have a multitude of different markets, but one of the most popular markets is the total games. Now, this is where we add the total games for player A against the total games for player B, and that is what the market is settled on. Now, total games varies on different courts. We have 3 different main courts in the tennis season, or 4 really if we count indoors. We have a slow clay court, which we see in the springtime across Europe, where we get really slow courts. We have a medium pace hard courts, which are consistent all around the world. And we have indoor courts, which are a little bit faster as well. And then we have the grass at Wimbledon and in the summer across in Europe. Now, each average game, total games, is different on each surface. Now, before I started working here with Bet Rivers on Because of You, and I'm back in the day, I was a tennis odds compiler. I was a bookmaker. I was the enemy, the one that you want to beat. And what I used to do is I used to have a rough sort of idea on what total games I would pitch on each level of surface. Now, on a clay court tournament, as I said, it's slower. There's much more breaks in serve. So the games naturally are lower. 21.5, I would suggest, is around about the average line for a clay court match. Now, obviously in first round matches, when we've got some big players who are dominant, who from the baseline, who try to win very easy, they come in a little bit lower than that, depending on the price of the players on the money line. If we go onto a hard court surface, then we probably go up one to around about 22.5. And then when we go into the grass court season, we know Wimbledon isn't as quick as it has been over the years, but they still go up. Total games for an average on a grass court in a best of 3 match, all these are best of 3 matches, is 23.5. Sometimes we see the lines go very high. When we see 2 big servers, we see the lines 24.5, 25.5, and even once in the years that I've been tennis betting, I've seen 26.5, which means on a best of 3 match, you have to go the distance to cash. They are not lines for me. I wouldn't get involved in those lines because we need so many things to happen for us. But on the flip side of that, we've seen matches on clay where lines have been as low as 18.5 and 19.5. Now, I'm more inclined to go the unders there rather than hope that the game we expect everything will go our way on the overs. And the reason why I like the unders there is because on the clay court, we have much more breaks, we have much more slower services, and we have much more players who are much more suitable and able to play the tennis on there, and they have a mindset to win the game early. Carlos Alcaraz is probably one of the best clay court players in the world. He likes to get the job done quickly. 6-up, 6-1, 6-2. Those kind of scorelines come in clay court matches. They very rarely come on a hard court. They very rarely come on a grass court. So I'm not going to play the overs 24.5, 25 and 26 and hope for the best. But sometimes when I see 18.5 and 19.5 with a very heavy favourite on the money line on a clay court, then I probably would go on the under. So in tennis, we have 4 Grand Slams. We have the Australian Open over in Melbourne in January. We have the French Open in Paris in May, Wimbledon in June, and then we have the US Open at Flushing Meadow in August. Now, Grand Slam tennis is a little bit different to the traditional tennis that we see week in and week out. It's the best of 5 sets for men's. And like I said there with the total games in best of 3 sets, we see differences on the different surfaces. If we're looking at a French Open match, the games have actually gone up over the years from what they used to be. Around about 33.5, I would expect for an average first round match at the French Open. At Wimbledon, you're looking around about 36.5. and at the US Open and the Australian Open, around about the same, 35.5, 36.5 for an average first round match. Obviously, as the tournament goes up and the players are closer together and competitive in the betting, the lines of the total games will go up. The one thing I would say here, though, is that traditionally at the French Open, it's the slowest surface. As I've highlighted in the video before and spoken about, if you haven't seen it, check the video out on the best of 3 sets. There's much more wipeouts in the total games on the clay court. And I've done some analysis over the last 6 or 7 years at Roland Garros. And if you bet under blind in all those matches, so we went under the total games, it doesn't matter what line it is, if it's 18.5, if it's 27.5, or 18.5 is a bit low for a best of 5. But if it's 27.5, 28.5, 30.5, you will make money. You will cash by betting unders blind. You may fall into one that goes over, but also you've got to remember the majors this time around, especially at Wimbledon, with unders, a big advantage now is that we have a final set tiebreak. Back in the day, you had to win by 2 clear games in the final set at Wimbledon and the majors, which meant we saw matches going on to 22-20 in the final set. We saw that record match between Nicolas Mahut and John Isner, very famous. I think it was a crazy match. There were 87 games in the total match. Now that we have a final set tiebreak, a super tiebreak, you've got to win by 10 points, first to 10 points. That has seen the total games go down in majors statistically over the years. So the rule of thumb here, we got carried away. We like to go overs. We like to bet things high. We like to see action. But on Grand Slams, especially on clay, especially at the French Open, we want to bet unders. Unders is the way to cash on total games in majors. Well, tie breaks are random. They're almost 50-50 if you look at them. We get to the stage of the match where people could be tired. We obviously have the favourites with the money line, and they're going to be the favourite in the tie break. But I think it's a huge advantage if you serve first to the tie break. You're always setting the example. If you win that first point, that's crucial in the tie break. Then you know the opponent has to hold his serve twice to have the advantage. You've got a free shot on those 2 points. So if you're looking at a tie break, we're going in, depending on the line, you have to look at the money line as well. So depending on an average game, if it's a 50-50 call, then I really want to be with the guy serving first. If it's a minus 150 chance, I want to be with whoever serves first. But as we go lower down in the betting with a very heavy favourite, then obviously that goes a little bit out the window. But for me, whoever serves first in a tiebreak, I think has a huge advantage psychologically. And I believe that if you want to play a little bit of value on a tiebreak, I think you've got to be with the guy serving first. Now, one of my golden rules in tennis betting is to get with a player, especially at a major, who has had the win of his career. We've seen it happen in so many sports. It doesn't matter if it's tennis, whatever it is. You have a big win, a big fall is awaiting for you in the next round. And tennis is the prime example of that. How I make my tennis prices, how I handicap tennis, I rate every player on the draw. I have the top player at 100, I have the next guy at 50, I have 40. And what that means, if a guy is rated 100 and a guy is rated 50, the guy at 100 should be minus $2 and the guy at 50 should be $2. Guy at 100, guy at 33, guy at 100 should be minus $3. A guy rated at 33 should be 3-1. When we have an upset, Novak Djokovic gets beat by the well-ranked 60 player. Everybody wants to be on the World 60 player. He's unbelievable. He's been on centre court. He's had the big win of his career. The media attention on him is massive. He's playing a guy who's rated higher than him on my ratings. Because the public plays to get with the man who beat the number 1 seed, the line is wrong. They're playing on court number 15. There's 150 people watching, and he's on the front page of every newspaper in the world. The pressure on him is immense. I think that's the time to get against him. Just because he's beaten Djokovic doesn't mean he potentially played the game of his life. It could be the number 1 seed's had a bad day, could be at 70%. I don't think it happens very rarely. If you go through history, look at the guys who produced the big shocks, and the women as well, the big shocks at majors. They very rarely back it up with another win. They're not put on a show court, they're put on an outside court because they're not playing a big player, and it doesn't really work. So if you have a big win at Wimbledon, or you have a big win at the US Open, or wherever it is, fade that player in the next round. They're going nowhere. Now, one of the markets that BetRivers have for the correct score betting on the set, you can bet an opponent to win 6-love, you get a player to win 6-1, all the way up to 7-6 on the different outcomes. I think there's a lot of randomness and a lot of luck on this market. If you're picking someone to win 7-5, for example, or 6-4, for example, you need a bit of luck. But there's two score lines which aren't luck, which statistics really do back up, and there could be value for you. The first one, and they're both at the different ends of the spectrum actually. One of them is the bagel, the 6-love, and the other one is the 7-6, that the first set or the second set, or whichever set you're betting on, goes the distance to the tiebreak. Now the reason I want to play these two is obviously we have the stats. We have players that we know win 6-love quite regularly. Igor Swiatek, the world number 1, or male number 2 now, I think she is, depending on the time of this video. She's historically a very, very fast starter. She gets out the traps and she blows players away. 6-love, she wins a high regularity of her matches at 6-love. She'll be a player to look for, and she'll be value at 6-love. And tie breaks, we know certain players have a huge hold on their serve. Their first serve percentage is extremely high. And when we get 2 men who are serve dominated, the tie break becomes some value. We're not specifically saying who's going to win the tie break, but we're looking at tie break, 7-6. So I think we can play the 7-6 one way, 7-6 the other way. But we're looking at correct scores. I think if you lose statistics and you lose knowledge and you use math, 6-0 is definitely, you can find some value. 7-6, you can definitely find some value. The markets in between, you may find some value, but you need a lot of luck to go your way. Now, we know on the opening set that both players should come into the match very fresh and all very fit. Sometimes it doesn't happen that way, but we should expect that mostly. So if we've got a match where we think the total games are going to be quite high, we should get the majority of them in the first set. The second set, fatigue might come in and we might see a different match. So if you look at a game, you think it's going to be overs, set 1 sometimes does give you some value. Or the unders, you can play the unders as well. And I think for me, if I like a game to go over 23.5 or 22.5, depending on the service that's being played, I might look at the first set games here. 6-4 is a big number, 10.5 is a big number. We want to go over 10.5 if we're looking at a match to be tight. That's the big line for me. Sometimes you can get a real nice price on 10.5. You can go 9.5, you can go 8.5, but the lower you go, the lower the odds you're going to get. So 10.5 is a line that I like to play if I expect a match to go over. And I would always play first set rather than second set, because we could have injuries, we could have problems, and first set we know we should be playing off a level playing field. But if we are playing the over 10.5 and we are looking for that and we think this game's going to go on, then we've got to have a little saver on the tiebreak in the first set. We've got to go over 12.5 as well. Go for the monster bet. If we get to 5-5 in a tennis match, the chances of a tiebreak are very high. It's very rare that, well, there is occasions, but it's rare that we're going to get a 7-5 set. If we go 5-5, most of the time we're going to go all the way to 7-6, all the way to a tiebreak. So for me, on set 1, if I'm looking at a match, I'm going to go overs. I wouldn't put anybody off betting the over 10.5 at a nice price, but also having a little saver on a tiebreak in the match, over 12.5 games as well in set 1. Don't worry about set 2, just set 1.